I'm so excited to bring up our next panel where we have three distinguished educators who can provide their actual on-the-ground perspective, not just summaries, but specifics, into how they utilize the strategies with success. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce the moderator of that panel, Dr. Christina Grant, the State Superintendent of Education in DC.
And if my fellow panelists could join me, Caylah Green from DC Public Schools Charles Hart Middle School, Dr. Kelley Ivy from UDC, and Shatavia Kelley from Friendship Public Charter School, Blow Pierce. We'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, that's better. Okay, I needed the energy. Good morning, good afternoon. How are we doing? Good morning, good morning. I'm so excited to be here today. And so Josh, you're on the other. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here today for a critical conversation around math. And I won't age myself, but I very much grew up in a world where I would proudly say well, I'm just not good at math, or math is not me. And when we think about equity, access, the stories that our children are telling themselves about themselves, it is core that we actually break that sentence. We are all math, it's accessible. I could talk at length about the importance of words and the words that our children say to themselves. And so I'm palpably filled with joy that we're all sitting in a room talking about math as someone who was a literacy teacher, right? It's critically important that our students see themselves as mathematicians, as individuals who can solve complex problems, who can take on challenges, and that they are leading that conversation. They're going into post-secondary options, but they're saying, I want to be a statistician. I want to study economics. I want to be the person that solves the next complex problem in this country. And it starts here today. I'm thrilled to share the stage with our actual educators because there's no, any of you, most of you, either are teachers or have been teachers. There's something sacred that occurs in that classroom, and I can remember, the moment when a child unlocks their love for learning, and if it happens in a math classroom, that dramatically will impact the future of the children in this city and across the country. I will stop talking, but one of the most common strategies we've heard from Bright Spot leaders and teachers was building on students' math confidence. And so, Shatavia, I want you to start, but I want everyone to weigh in. How do you think about that work on building a student's math confidence?
So in my space, or let's say starting in August, it's super important for me, or I think any classroom teacher, to build classroom culture. So that looks differently in every space, but specifically in my space, is having expectations set, but also giving them the opportunity to set their own expectations. So allowing them to create goals, allowing them to participate in math discourse, allowing them to see different ways to apply math. Also just giving them just the motivation that's needed, allowing them to see me make mistakes. There's an example. I was at the board teaching, and yes, I know I made the mistake, but I just wanted to see who was going to see it. And, of course, they want to raise their hand. They want to, correct my mistake. Who doesn't want to correct the teacher? And so that alone just elicited so much conversation in the room. Oh, Miss Kelley made the mistake. And I'm like, well, how do I go about fixing it? So it got to include even some of the scholars who may not necessarily raise their hand to participate all the time, but they knew that mistake that I made, and so they wanted to engage into that conversation. So that alone just helps to strengthen and build their motivation and their love for math. So I think someone spoke to it earlier, we have to show them that we love math. And once they see that we're confident in solving problems and working through different solutions, then they will be able to do that themselves.
Yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree. When you talk about mistakes, one of the protocols that I use in my classroom is my favorite mistake, especially when I see multiple students making the same mistake. I'll be like, I need you to go put my favorite mistake on the board, and we're going to talk about it. because then it makes it less of a weighted thing. It's not a negative thing. This is one of my favorite things that you've done. Let's talk about it, and then we have discourse about it. We identify what the mistake was and how they were thinking about it. So my favorite mistake is one protocol, but then also celebrating when students do something awesome. And the other day I was teaching how to multiply binomials to get factored form into standard form, for example. And I go over to Mr. Vini, and on his paper, I can see all of the mistakes, but that's not what I focused on in my conversation with him. What I focused on was what he did right. Like, these are the things that you are really strong at right now. And now you see how you put this number here? Well, your understanding was a little bit wrong. So we're going to correct that real quick and then move you forward. So then he has that real-time feedback to know where he's at, and give him the confidence to move forward because he already knows what he did right. So I think that's really strong, a really strong way of students knowing what they're good at.
So I'm on the other end of the building confidence because, like, I'm a math teacher, educator, and researcher. So my job is to build the math teachers' confidence so that they can build the students' confidence. And so, like, when I have my secondary math students, teaching middle school and high school, they good. I don't necessarily have to build their confidence, but like right now I'm teaching the elementary math methods course, and it is a weekly struggle because, the majority of elementary teachers, they weren't STEM majors or math majors. So I'm working to build their confidence. And, I find that doing like modeling for them, how to do it, us doing the math in my classroom before you have to teach the math or while you're teaching the math, since my students are actually in-service teachers, and then showing them videos of, teachers who I feel like are skilled, who are doing what I want them to do. And so, like, literally, yesterday I saw a teacher who I did my dissertation research on, and she posted this Instagram video of her questioning a student. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's scaffolding. And so, I'm calling her during class, can you send me that video? I need to show my students. And so for them to see, okay, so this is scaffolding. How is it different than differentiated instruction? And for us to practice it in our classroom so that they build their confidence to actually do it with their students. So,
You, first of all, the energy, I'm like, I want to go back to, I did not have Dr. Ivy when I was getting my license. But, one theme I heard from the three of you is just like the high level of vulnerability that you have to have on both sides. Like, I couldn't fathom making a mistake on the board and just like helping someone catch it, because you create a space for a dialogue. And in teaching, we have to lean into creating that space with our students. But I want to stay with you a second longer, Dr. Ivy. When you think about, like, you spoke about the difference between elementary educators and secondary, but how do you go deep with them on math concepts and really equipping them to be ready to step into the classroom? I feel like, I always look at student work now and I'm like, wow, y'all learn how to do math in a very different way than how I learned to do it. But how do you do that inside the classroom as you're preparing our educators to meet our learners?
we do math. Like, literally, we do math together. So last week was addition and subtraction because I'm working with the elementary folks. And so I realized that I didn't give them what I wanted to give them, like everything, because I like to include everything. So I was like, well, today let's start class as your warm-up. Let's look at these student-invented methods of how they solve, these addition and subtraction problems and figure out, can we figure out their thinking? And so that, even doing that, helps build their like conceptual knowledge and then their knowledge of the math and the content. We call it PCK, so pedagogical content knowledge in the math education world. And so, like, if you're doing it in my classroom, I'm confident that you can do it in your classroom. So they use Khan Academy. I literally assign math homework for my teachers. I have to know that they're able to do it. Like, I literally train them to be comfortable. Like, I know my son is going to be in your classroom one day, so I need you to know what you're doing,
Amen.
Literally.
Oh, First of all,
Yeah.
I want to go. But I want to stay on this a little bit longer. How do you all go about feeling supported, confident, ready to meet our learners where they're at, and you're responsible for getting them where they're going to be?
One of the things that was most humbling that one of my coaches told me was, if students didn't learn it, did you teach it?
Say it again.
And that was really, really heavy. But within that is an opportunity, because there's so many phases in the cycle of teaching and learning that where you can really leverage to make that magic happen. So be it like the backwards planning, understanding by design, we sat there and we went through every grade level standard and unpacked it. What do students need to know how to do? And what do they show? How do they show that they know how to do it? We looked at, okay, once we internalize the unit, let's internalize the lesson. What does that look like? What's the intended product? And then we go through and implement. And after implementation, we reflect on implementation. After that reflection, we analyze student data. We respond to student data. So having a coach that took me through that entire cycle was really helpful, because those pieces are not in isolation. They interact with one another. And those are the decisions that keep us moving forward, so that way we can get through the year and make sure students know what they need to know by the end of it.
And for me, a lot of it revolves around coaching. So I have a very, very strong coach who's here today.
Shout out to the coach.
Right.
Wave your hand in the air. Hey, coach.
Yes, and also I have Miss Bell here as well. All right, our third grade coach as well. So every week we have these content planning meetings. And so we're able to plan, and this is me meeting with other third graders in the Friendship Network, so it's some of them that are here as well. Hi, friends. And so we meet every Tuesday, and so we discuss the misconceptions, or how did things go in class today? What lesson are you on? What did you do? And it's giving you the time and opportunity to say, hey, this worked for me, or this didn't work for me, let me try this in my space. And just a collaborative effort where you're sharing out ideas and how to move forward, and things that your scholars may need, things that you might didn't even think of. You get to, talk to someone else who may be going or experiencing the same issues. But also at school, planning with my fourth grade friend over here, Mr. Young. We co-taught last school year. But again, just reaching out to fourth grade and fifth grade and just seeing what they're doing in those spaces also helps me prepare for what I need to do in my space. It's like, okay, let me reach out to Ms. Tubman, who teaches second grade math. Let me check in with her and see, okay, all right, they're struggling with this here. How can I help her? And what things can I implement in my class now that can help strengthen them, so that we can go ahead and kind of fine-tune these skills before they move on to fourth grade. So I think it's just collaborative planning kind of helps support what I need and getting immediate feedback. So, you come in for an observation, hey, give me that immediate feedback, so that whatever misconceptions I may have, or whatever, the scholars may need in a moment, that we're fixing it and not letting it continue to go on, but we're kind of like deading it in a moment. Like, oh, Miss Kelley, I noticed you did this, or I see you're doing great with this. Let's try this. And so that's what my coach is very good with doing in the moment. Like, he will even come in, and I'm just shouting him out, but he'll come in a moment, after reviewing the plans, and it could be a small group, and he'll just jump right in, and he's just, in the moment, like, oh, let me see how I can help you right here with these scholars. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. So I'm here to support, and yeah, I think it's just, that collaborative planning piece is definitely important when it comes to helping me feel prepared and plan.
I have a script, but I have questions in my own head, and I'm going to try to stay on the script. But, you don't have to answer, but there's such a palpable space between the vulnerability that exists for you to plan with someone, be vulnerable with someone, embrace feedback. When I think about my teaching, I'd get observed and be lucky if I got my feedback 3 months later. Like, we done moved on. And so, it's humbling to hear the role that plays, because it makes you stronger when you're with the kids. You create the sense of learning. I'm going to stay to the script, although I want to stay here. But the next question really is about the role that technology is playing in this place in space. You know, someone was like, "Superintendent, what are we going to do about AI?" And I was like, artificial intelligence has been with us for a very long time. And our students are using it in ways that we have to catch up to. But as we think about math instruction, how are you all, and you all can weigh in on this one, but how are you thinking about the role that technology is playing to either hinder our progress or to accelerate our progress?
So when I think about the way I use technology in weekly instruction, I mainly use two platforms, iReady and Zern. iReady is great because we can really help target specific skills that students don't have across those 4 domains, and it's a path specifically created for them based on their diagnostic assessment. On the Zern level, students do get that immediate feedback, but it's with grade level content, so that's huge in addition to the instruction that they're receiving inside of the classroom and the collaboration that they have with their peers and their engagement with the math standards of mathematical practice. In addition to that, I think Desmos is a really great tool to help visual learners because they can literally play with it and also get that real world feedback. Like, what happens if we put a negative here? And how might we shift this 3 units to the left? Or how do I balance those scales? So they really get to experience that. And then on the other side, it's at the end of the year, we take CAPE, and that is an online assessment. Yes, we do.
We're in the middle of
that
it.
is an online assessment, and it is part of like digital literacy. Do you know how to type in a fraction? Can you actually make an exponent on the computer? And so we have to, and we have an obligation to ensure that students are getting that practice along the way while they're learning it, because that's the way that they are going to be expected to express their math thinking.
Does anyone else want to weigh in?
I think it has its benefits. So technology is cool and all, but I think in a classroom space, I think you have to limit some of your exposure to this technology. And because not every scholar is going to learn through technology. So it has to be differentiated. So it may be beneficial to use during a small group, or may be beneficial during intervention. But it shouldn't be something where they're coming in school and they're just sitting on technology all day, because we have to teach them how to apply things. And so, again, they spend so much time virtually that they got so used to having iPads and tablets right in front of them. But I think it's like part of our role is to kind of wean them off and show them, like, you can still do math without using a calculator on the computer. Like, use your thinking brain. Like, we have to be able to teach them how to apply it outside of that space. And again, we do use iExcel, we use Zern, and they are super helpful platforms. But at the same time, hey, it's a limit. So in my classroom, we would do it between 15 to 20 minutes, and then we're moving on to do something hands-on, especially at the 3rd grade level. No one wants, they get enough TV time and stuff at home. TikTok, like, we're going to put it down. We're going to use the pencil and paper. We're going to use some cubes. We're going to use some fraction strips. So just including other resources for them to use has been helpful for us.
Yeah, I was thinking through the pandemic, and I have I guess she's in 10th grade now, but she was in 7th grade then, and watching her do math at home was the most painful, and I felt defenseless. I was like, I can teach you how to read, but I can't help at all. And so the technology question is a tricky one, because like you said, we want our students to be able to demonstrate what they know in multiple ways, and also, you know, in 3rd grade, manipulatives are life. Like, they have to feel it, see it, touch it. I think when I was a teacher, I would like dress up as characters and try to like act out novels. What tactics do you all use in math? Like, I'm like, is it really just pizza and dividing them in fractions? And you can tell I'm old, but I'm like, how do you like, when you do your lesson, you're like, what's the hook? I'm like, how do you hook someone into binomials? Like, where we start there? So what do the tactics look like?
You want to start? Sure. So it varies. So yes, sometimes pizza is involved. But sometimes, again, right now we're in Module 5 using fractions. So again, using your fraction strips or using the candy bar. I had a scholar to call me. It was on the weekend, and she was like, Miss Kelley, look, I have a Kit Kat. And she was like, it has 5 equal parts, and I'm going to eat 1/5 of this Kit Kat.
Come on.
And I would have
I would've
4 kids
cried.
left. And I was just like, oh, wow. And Sam's Club, you know, trying to do some shopping, but just taking that moment. Like, she was so tickled the fact that she was able to reference my candy bar, you know, example in class. And so when she came in Monday, she was like, yeah, you remember the story about the Kit Kat? And she was telling everyone else. She was like, well, what about the Snickers? How can we do a Snickers? So that in itself just allowed me to just, you know, it's like, dang, my examples are really paying off. But again, showing your interest and your love for math. We have, what is it called? 24. It's a game that if you're in the yes. So we play that. So again, I am also trying to solve the card as well as them. So it's like beat the teacher. So, you know, of course they want to get super competitive. And we also have a IXL challenge that's going on right now in the class. So I logged on earlier to see, and I had some scholars who in the first challenge, they were like, didn't get any skills mastered. But now I'm looking, I had one scholar who went from 0 skills to now 27 skills within a week mastered. So that alone, so sometimes.
Let's not walk past that.
So sometimes just using those challenges and incentives to get them to buy in, just like us, you know. Hey, we need some incentives sometimes too. You know, pizza is always great. My school does a great job.
As you look at your principal.
You know, and so I think sometimes just taking a step back and saying, okay, when I was in 3rd grade, what would I have wanted in a moment, or what did my teacher do in a moment to get me to really buy into this math concept? So, sorry.
No, I love every
We do not
part of
apologize.
that. So in terms of the interest, I completely agree. You have to get to know your kids. You need to know your students, and so that relationship building is so needed, because one of my kids, Earl, he comes in and he's got his app and he follows this, like, it's like a fake stock market investment app. So I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that you made $5 last night based on your $1 investment. And so I'm like, okay, bet. Now, when we figure out average rate of change for functions, instead of pulling up a temperature graph, I'm gonna pull up a stock market, a stock that y'all are interested in. Or you get to choose one, and we're gonna analyze that and figure out, okay, well, when would be the most opportune time to invest in this stock, given that we can calculate the average rate of change between different time intervals. So those things are huge, because then they're asking the questions. Like, they're facilitating the learning. They are curious. And so anytime students get to lead their learning and through their curiosity is a win.
How many of us wanted to take the class? I was like, I was like, investment strategy. I hear things I need in my life. What does that look like with educating the educators? How do you,
Teachers.
yeah, and how do you, because adults are way harder than children on any day of the week. And so what do those tactics look like?
And teachers are the
Y'all
worst
know it's
students.
true. Come on now.
Okay, so you asked, like, what are
the tactics that you use in your
the hook?
classroom
Yeah.
to get folks engaged in, I mean, you're out here assigning homework and they're doing it. So
Yes.
they must be bought in.
So it may be, no, it probably is oppositional to the researcher panel that went before us, but my hook / my superpower is culture in the math classroom. It really is. And the lived experiences, like the stock market, the Kit Kat, those are the students' lived experiences. We talk about, like, knowing your students is twofold. Like, I know my students because I know who they are as people, but I also know who they are as mathematicians and their ability as learners and doers of mathematics. So I use all of that in my lessons. So I'm teaching, literally, I have a full project that I break in 3 parts. So the first homework assignment is I gave my students, my teachers, a mathography that they have to tell me all about their math experiences, their love, their hate, in a 5-page paper. And then, but they were really excited to write about it, though, I promise you. And then the next assignment is, now that you've told me this, how about you create a mathography for your students? And they were so excited to do it because they wanted to get to know their students. We call it funds of knowledge, just their cultural characteristics. Who are they responsible for when they get home? Their siblings, what do their parents do? And so the third assignment is, now that you know who your students are just a little bit more, compare your experiences to them. Like, do they have that same math anxiety that you had when you were growing up? Okay, great. Now what you gonna do about it? You know, like literally that is what I'm training my teachers as a teacher educator to do. So that's my hook, culture in the math classroom, because it works. And there are several research papers by people in the area, like Bowie State, University of Maryland, Howard University, that show that it works. Culture in the math classroom, it works. They call it rehumanizing math education. And I mean, you have examples
you to know
of
there are
it.
people
Yeah.
writing down. I was like, I need someone to yeah, never mind. But I don't want to just gloss over it, because particularly for like our high school students, like for them to be able to share, like this is the thing that made me lose confidence in my math ability.
Yes.
Then as an educator, you can come in and like name that thing or restore that thing, and that puts them back on track in a different way.
At the end of their career, though.
Right.
So it's like you're dealing with that in high school,
Right.
when they built that anxiety at the elementary level,
Right.
you know?
Right. And you're in yourself as a teacher, right? That if you are standing and delivering the content, but you actually can't articulate your own insecurities, how do you become this person that's open to feedback and coaching and developing? But you were going to say something, Caitlin.
Yeah, I also have my students create a timeline at the beginning of the year, and they draw upon their main 4 math experiences. So I say a minimum 4. And oftentimes they will talk about, okay, this is when I learned multiplication. So that stands out to them. What also stands out to them is how teachers made them feel in the room. And so they were like, I really loved 4th grade because my teacher was fill in the blank. And then vice versa. 3rd grade was really challenging because XYZ. And so, like you said, if we have that information about students, then we can really start to build up their confidence, especially if we understand why it broke down or when it did, or we know what does excite them within their math timeline. So I love that educators get to do that too for themselves.
Yeah.
And even speaking to that, I know a lot of us, you know, and a lot of the scholars will be like, well, my mom or my dad, you know, they're not good at math. And so they keep hearing that. And then they're like, oh, I'm not good at math either. And it's so when you're in my space, we're all good at math. We're going to try, you know, you just got to constantly remind them. But it's also about bringing in the family. I know they have lots of initiatives in the city geared towards reading and the literacy rates and things like that in DC. But I also think we got to shift the focus too. Like, how can we help parents be more comfortable with doing this new math, and let them know that, hey, you're using math every day as well. Because a lot of times, even some of my friends will be like, oh, I don't use math. I'm like, you drive, you get dressed in the morning, like you do use math every day. So just getting them to see how it's related to the things that they do in the daily, I think can help as well. So I think we have to now bring in the family and get some families involved in helping to rid some of this anxiety around math.
Yeah. When you all think about math fluency, which is separate from confidence, how do you actually in the classroom get students used to using correct terms in the right way so that they can embody math and make it a part of their life? I mean, you know, in English, no one is walking around saying like, who's the main character and, you know, what is the theme of the story? But I do think that we have a lot of work to do in building the fluency of our students in math and then giving them the confidence to engage. So I would love for your first.
Of me. So fluency happens daily. So it can be something that they're doing on paper, where they're doing addition, fluency on multiplication, division fluency, rounding fluency. It can happen on paper, but it can also happen verbally. So we can just be skip counting in class, like put it on a beat and we just skip count it out, or have a student to start the skip counting off and we fill in. So it's lots of songs and routines that we've practiced. But we also do this in the hallways. Like, we do it all the time. So in transition, waiting for the restroom, or transitioning from lunch. I have the multiplication cards on the binder ring. So we're going up and down the hallways, like, oh, stopping, what's 8 times 7? And everyone's ready to respond because we've been doing this so long. So it's just finding ways to keep it fun. The fluency is also important. So that's pretty much what we do in third grade. Again, just turning everything into a song and figuring out a way to just keep them engaged. Because, your attention spans are so short, but when you're walking around with cards, or you're letting them be the leaders in the fluency, so you're giving them the cards and you're like, okay, you're the fluency leader for today, or giving them the assignment of standing at the front of the class and leading to get their other peers to respond. It doesn't take a lot at the third grade level.
My 8th graders
I
were
was
also
going to say,
singing.
I was going to say the space between 3rd and 8th grade.
They were also singing, but we sing the quadratic formula to Pop Goes the Weasel, and it's great. And then, they get their solos. Does anybody need a solo right now? And it's great. So we use some of the same strategies. So I know the report talks about remediation versus just-in-time intervention and acceleration. And so remediation, sure, you struggle with dividing fractions, but that's not going to hinder you from accessing the grade level content, and I won't let it. And so some of the ways that I support students with whatever skill comes first is by, one, knowing the content myself, because by knowing the content, I understand, okay, this might be where a breakdown happens, and I can plan ahead. And so whatever we might do for a warm-up might be dividing fractions, and we might look at that algorithm. I have anchor charts all over my room, and so it becomes a real-time, let's intervene right here. Look at that. What patterns do you realize? What do you notice? And how can we use the same pattern in this problem here? The same thing happens when we solve equations, integer operations. And so I do have a giant number line in my room, and students typically, or one way to learn the integer operations is through the number line. And so I'll have them look at the number line very quickly. Okay, what is -2 minus 3? And so it's taking up a little bit of time, but hopefully over time it's less. And so those fluency pieces are built within the problems that they're required to do that are on grade level.
And I would say so I love the examples that they gave, and those were like in the classroom, and you can think of it as outside of the classroom too. Like last week, I went to observe an elementary teacher at Ann Beers Elementary School, and I was walking up the steps, and they have math facts painted on the steps.
That's right.
Literally, there are multiplication. And I was like, stop, let me take a picture. And so like on the steps, so just seeing it. I mean, they may say it when they're walking up the steps. They may not say it, but they see it. So I every day when I walk up these steps, I see that 7 times 5 is 35. Like I see it every day. And then like on the parent perspective, so when my son was home last week for spring break, so PG County, and it was like, I know that you are off. I am not, Kingston. And so, I'm a teacher, so I had him watching like math videos and number blocks, you all, number blocks. It's on Netflix, it's on YouTube. And so he's building like these math facts, but he's in kindergarten. And so he's seeing like the 10 times tables are superheroes. And so now he knows about the times tables in kindergarten because they're superheroes. And he saw it on number blocks and didn't even understand. I was like, well, other numbers can be multiplied by 10 as well. He's like, what? So you can multiply 2 times 5. And he's like, I thought only 10 can be, so it's that knowledge and building the conceptual knowledge early, even at home as a parent too.
So I don't, who's monitoring me? Where are we with time? Because we have questions from the audience, and so I'm gonna go to those now, and I'll finish these, because these are good questions. So the first one, and feel free to wave your hand if it was you. Traditionally, math has been presented as neutral and apolitical, yet we know that historically Black women and girls have faced invisibility and exclusion in mathematical learning spaces. How do we extend conversations about culturally responsive pedagogy to math teacher prep programs and PLCs to promote robust math identity development and position math as a tool of liberation and resistance for Black girls? You see?
Yes, question.
You see? And I was like, nothing
let me
on this
take it.
paper trumps this question, and so we're just going to go with it. So,
Let me position myself back at.
okay, because then I looked at the panel and I said, well, then, we done it.
That's a beautiful question. Okay, response. So I appreciate, so I'm fresh out of dissertation, and so I
Congratulations. Hold on. Let's pause.
Yes.
Dr. Kelley, Ivy, doctor.
It's been 1 year and 2 days. And so I appreciate the knowledge that I learned at University of Maryland in my graduate program, because like at that time it was like equity, equity, equity. Okay, so what does this mean in the math classroom? So I've literally learned how to train teachers for equitable math teaching practices and culturally responsive and relevant instruction by the materials that we use in the classroom. And so like if you look at my curriculum for secondary and for elementary teachers, week by week, we literally go, these are the math practices that work best for Black boys. These are the math practices that work best for Latinx students. And the person who wrote this paper was on this panel, and they're at Bowie State. They are in your community. And here are the best practices for students with learning differences, because that's how we're going to phrase it, because they just learn a little bit differently than the other students in your classroom. So they literally read these articles. However, reading is not always understanding. So you're going to practice that for me in this lesson plan that you're going to create. And then I'm going to do the extra and come to your classroom and watch you do it and evaluate you, provide feedback, and then let's work together so that you are comfortable. Because even like with confidence, doing and being culturally responsive, it takes confidence just to do that, to not be scared about, inserting yourself and your stance and culture in the math classroom. Like teachers are afraid of it, And so I have to work so that teachers are not like, it's not that we can do this. So one of my secondary students, he's at Anacostia High School. So I went to observe him the other day, and his students are like, when are you coming back? But anywho, so he was like, my students see their parents using the ATM, but they have never used the ATM. They have never balanced the checkbook. They don't know, they just don't know. They've never been exposed to that. So he literally created a whole lesson plan on, okay, this is just like division, this is balancing a checkbook. And I mean the students at the board, and he's allowing his Spanish-speaking students to say it in Spanish for these Spanish speakers over here, and he's trying to translate. And then the English-speaking, students in the classroom are like, what'd you say? It's a working environment. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, so how did you take this a step further? Because, that's my job, is to push him, as a teacher. And he's like, okay, all right, Dr. Ivy, what are you talking about? It's like, okay, so what is the whole goal of this? You are literally working to create human beings who can be citizens in a society and not overdraw their bank accounts.
Amen.
That's the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And you don't even think about it like that, but you're pushing it a step further, and you can do it. You really can.
Math is liberation, truly.
Who can make the T-shirt?
I
I saw one raise a hand.
I'd wear it.
I think that math is a tool that students can use to change the world. And when we think about the highest paying jobs that are coming out, it's all in engineering. We spoke about AI earlier. And when students don't have access to that level of mathematics, they don't have access to those lucrative careers. And so when we think about how do we use math in the classroom, it's to do exactly that. And I think keeping that purpose in mind, front and center, as we're grueling through lesson internalization and grading papers, that is the why. And so giving students the opportunity to do that in the place. So one time I taught geometry at Big Anna at Anacostia High School, and students designed a city that then took into account what they saw in their communities and the challenges that they wanted to solve around. And we used, of course, angle relationships and things like that in the content. But if students don't have the opportunity to practice math as it pertains to their world while they're learning it, then it's just gonna, there's so many other things that our students' attention gets. And so it needs to compete with that attention, and that's how.
Oh,
For me, representation matters. So again, if my scholars are coming in every day and they're seeing me put my best foot forward, they're seeing me prepared and prepped and ready to go. They're seeing me as a professional, but also as a teacher, a human who respects them and respects the space and the things that they're learning. And, you know, when they see me doing that, I think it plays into who they grow to believe they can become. So, you know, and even thinking just from the female perspective, being, you know, a math teacher and through my female scholars, and this year I happen to have a lot of female students in the class this year. Last year was majority of boys, so I knew the energy was different, you know, but this year it's a lot of female students, and so them just seeing them become inquisitive about math and develop this love early on, it's like, okay, well, what can I do outside of this space to help and helps that it continues to grow. So we have books. So I have a library in my classroom, and so we have books of leaders in math. They love the book of Katherine Johnson. They'll go and pull that, or the Hidden Figures book, and they'll reference that like, oh, did you know this is what she did? And she helped get the, you know, rocket ship to space. And I'm like, yeah, yep, she did that. And they're like, oh, I can do that too. So just reminding them of all the possibilities that they can grow and achieve, and that we're in their corner. Like it just doesn't stop here. I had the opportunity to loop with scholars from pre-kindergarten. I started as a co-teacher, and then kindergarten I received that same cohort of students, and I looped from kindergarten, first, second, which was all virtual, and then third grade is where we were back in person. So we got to develop this like this family feel of things, and so where people were having trouble with getting their scholars to log on a daily basis in a virtual space. I had all 21 of my scholars logged on, or they were calling me like, hey, Miss Kelley, you're late. You know, I'm like, give me a second. You know, having a little Wi-Fi trouble. Give me 1 second. I'm logging on right now. So, you know, just from the years of building these relationships, not just with them, but also with their families. So just taking it, and now they're currently 5th graders, and just seeing how, you know, their love for math, and just not math, because I also taught ELA and things like that, but just seeing them grow and be able to continue to do well, you know, it just makes me feel good as a person to know, like, hey, I'm still in this space. I'm still going to push you, even though I may not be your classroom teacher. Just know I'm always in your corner. Whatever it is that you need, I have your back. So again, representation, them seeing us doing our best in spaces where we might not always be seen. So.
Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome. This is kind, you know, who wrote this question? I'm gonna ask it anyway, but be kind. First, I want to shout out the team at OSSI. Elizabeth Ross is the assistant soup of teaching and learning at OSSI. We passed financial literacy standards last month. So thank you to anyone who wrote back, gave us feedback, etc. Children assuredly will learn how to use an ATM machine and a whole lot more. It's the first set of standards we've ever had in the district, and you can see that as progress, or you can see that as something that should have existed. But we're really proud to finally have financial literacy standards in the district. And so who else is from OSSI? Is it just, hello, hey, Brian. Reveal yourselves. Thank you. Y'all know I have on glasses. Olivia, I know you're back there because you're feeding questions. She's like, ask my question next. No. But I highlighted the team in the room because the next question says, what do you wish district leaders should be paying attention to that we aren't? I know, right? That's what I said when I read it. Can we take her class? Step 1, yes.
I would love more math MAT students at the University of the District of Columbia. Come on in, just saying.
I mean, we are, that is a noted statement. We are holding on to that. But what else should we be thinking about that we aren't? See, and this is the thing, because I know that there are answers, and also,
Can you read it one more time?
it says, what do you wish district leaders should be paying attention to that we aren't?
Okay, so I could offer more focus on teacher induction. And I say that because, last night I asked my elementary folks, like, who's experienced teacher induction? And the ones who were in DCPS schools just looked at me like, and then the ones in the charter schools like, oh yeah, I do this, do that, do this, do that. So I think that could be a great kind of like checks and balances. Like, do those first year teachers who are not certified have the mentor that they need? Is that mentor certified in the same content area? Are the administrators or the LEAP coaches in the school able to really provide feedback to that new teacher? And a lot of times, like, my teachers, they're not new. They've just been teaching in charter schools, and now they're ready to go into like DCPS and become certified. They've just been scared about taking the praxis. And so just teacher induction, a little lot more focus on that.
You see, I'm gonna go ahead and let the question go because everybody's all nervous. And if you knew me well enough, you would know not to be nervous. But the team knows that I'm writing teacher induction down because we've been really intentional. It's not lost on me that I was a TFA teacher, but I was in a teaching program. Like, I have a master's in teaching, not in education, and there's a difference. And I had a mentor, a coach, both in my school and outside of my school, and all of those checkpoints matter when someone gives you 30 children and a key to a classroom and says, like, you know, and I am firm that that's the reason why I'm still in the work, is that I had a lot of support to get me through the first year. But you were going to weigh in.
Yes. Just in regards to, I think something that we need to pay attention to is our scholars or youth mental health. I know, again, we see these scholars on a daily basis, so we just have to make sure that we have the tools as a school, as a network, to make sure that they're getting exactly what they need. So sometimes having that one counselor in the building is just not enough to help with some of those issues that our scholars are going through before they get into our space. So just issuing or allowing some more supportive initiatives in response to mental health of our youth.
I can come up with something.
Go for it. Yeah. See, okay, we're in it now.
So careers are rapidly changing, and I don't know what they are. And so I think it would be helpful to have professional development around that real-world application piece that teachers may not know yet. And so how do we bridge partnerships with career folks and bring them into the classroom so that way we can draw upon their expertise and keep us moving forward in that way.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I drop something else?
Of course. You see, she was like, let me circle back. Go for it.
You have to build confidence to drop this. Okay, so I don't know the politics around it.
Jesus, she said the word politics. Okay.
I don't.
Keep going.
I stay out of that. However, one of my students, I had to go observe her last week, and I learned on the way that she is in the school for incarcerated youth. It was my first time visiting a prison to observe a teacher. And those are students, youth from DC, and I learned that she does not have a curriculum. So I wonder about the curriculum resources that are being put into DC for DC youth and DC schools, but I do wonder about I feel like it's kind of forgotten, the teachers, you know, of incarcerated youth need curriculum too.
We should connect about that offline.
Okay.
As someone who ran several schools with our incarcerated youth, so we really should talk about that offline. My final question, Alethea, you should be happy because I'm going to ask it. She said, as a former teacher, I find that I am not as patient with my loved ones as I was with my students. You know, everyone's nodding. They say, yeah, that feels right. What resources would you all recommend for caregivers that are deeply committed to, you know, not wanting to play into what we experience, being like, oh, my mom and dad are not good at math, right? Even myself, I'm mindful with Ari to not play into my own trauma and be patient and encouraging. And so her question is, what resources would you recommend to caregivers that are committed to implementing support, interventions to scholars at home?
One thing my school does well is invite families into the building. So we had a STEM fair, and students actually, they manned all of the tables and they taught their families how to do the math that we were learning inside of our classrooms. And so anytime that we can also leverage our scholars in that way to go home and teach a lesson, how did it go? What questions came up? I think that's a beautiful way to build relationships and also acknowledge the expertise of students. That doesn't require technology because sometimes technology is limited outside of the school space.
Shatavia, you want the last word?
Sure. So I know virtually we got access to a lot of parents and families just from logging on and being with them, you know, them sitting next to their scholar and working every day. So that gave them some confidence in just seeing how we do things in a classroom, what math looks like, what does ELA look like, how do I read to my scholar, how do I work through and solve this problem with them without giving them the answer. How do I not become frustrated when Johnny has 3 apples and, you know, you give him 2 more? How do I kind of monitor my patients and, you know, give them that wait time and allow them to think through the problems? So I think, like, virtually during the COVID years, we did get some, you know, parents were allowed to see what we do in a moment. But again, bringing them into the school space, we had a STEM fair as well, and a lot of parents came out. We had a literacy night. In which we're going to do a math night as well for parents to come in and just community members. So just figuring out ways to just get the community involved and parents so that they can figure out, so that we can figure out ways to best support our scholars. Additional resources, we have a homework book. So in that homework book, it has a homework helper page for the parent or the scholar to read before actually doing the homework. And so just also letting the parents and families know that, hey, we're here to support you as well. If you have any questions, stay connected, reach out. We're here to help you as well as your scholar.
Well, I really want to stay here a lot longer. It's not lost on me the makeup and composition of the panel, even myself and the teachers. I hope you feel a deep sense of pride of what's possible in Washington, D.C., because this actual panel doesn't exist in every system across the country, even though it should. So I do tremendously want to thank the 3 of you and all the educators in the room. I'm like looking at Principal Pierce, and I'm in Principal Spear, and I'm just like, yeah, friendship, Lil Pierce. You know, every time I walk in that school, I'm just like reminded of what's possible when educators are wrapping their hearts and minds around our kids. And again, I hope you leave this space really feeling inspired about what exists in DC, despite the improvements that we need to make. And just thank you all for your time, your energy, your commitment to our kids. I know what it feels like when a young Black girl is like, well, who is she? And they're like, she's everybody's boss. And I can only imagine what it's like when they see you every single day in their classroom teaching them math. And so thank you all for listening to this part of the day. Thank you all for being here. And I'm certain they're going to stick around so you can ask them more questions.